Hi, everyone. As most of you know, in addition to the regular show, John and I record what we call Cine-Files shorts every week for our supporters on Patreon, and we wanted to give you a small sample of the great conversations we've been having lately. One patron asked John and I what kind of people we were in high school and what were some of the most important experiences of our formative years. We discussed Martin Scorsese's criticism of streaming video and how those services are weakening the importance and visibility of what he calls true cinema. Another patron was interested in the topic of student films and our experiences with student filmmakers. Finally, we have a very challenging and complicated conversation about a very challenging and complicated topic. The issue we discussed was the controversial film Cuties and the portrayal of underage sexuality in TV and film. Now, this was a tough one, and John and I often struggled to find the right way to express ourselves. But the fact is, topics like that shouldn't be easy. But having the conversation is important, and I think we had a really good one. So we hope you enjoy this small sample of our Cine-Files shorts. And if you want to hear more, all you have to do is support the show on patreon.com/thecinefiles. That's cine-files with an F, where you can also suggest topics for our shorts, get advance notice of upcoming movies, have access to combined versions of our multi-part episodes. The combined Godfather 2 is almost 7 hours long. And you can even guarantee that one of your favorite films will appear on an upcoming episode of the Cine-Files. All that and more at patreon.com/thecinefiles. But for now, we hope you enjoyed this compilation of some of our favorite shorts, and we'll be back next week with another great film on the Cine-Files. Hello, Cine-Files, and welcome to another edition of Cine-Files Shorts. I am here with my trusty partner, John Roca.
Hello.
And this suggestion comes from Luke Leeson, Luke Leeson is the guy who's been helping us out with social media for, it's been a year now.
Yeah, a year.
He's been doing it.
Thank you, Luke.
He is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
And his suggestion for a Cinephile short, he says, I'm watching The Wonder Years with my kids, which is a show I love, by the way. And he says, they are asking me what I was like in high school. What were you guys like back then? Any amusing anecdotes to share? John, what were you like in high school?
My high school experience is separated into two separate blocks: freshman, sophomore year, and junior, senior year. That's essentially, and maybe that is for most people listening to us, I don't know, but for me, that's certainly how I remember high school. My freshman and sophomore years are full of a lot of bullying. I was overweight. I had a bowl haircut. I couldn't pick up a girl or talk to a girl to save my life, and it was a terrible experience. Super nerdy. Doing theater, trying to figure out what I'm going to do in high school, wearing like light blue dress pants to school with a light blue polo. And having my mom at times pick out my clothes. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, there was a time way back when where your mom would pick out your clothes when you went to high school as a freshman or a sophomore. So super nerdy. And then, of course, as I've said before in a number of other shows, I had that really hard experience with these bullies during my sophomore to junior year. And my father got me weights. We got a 10-speed bike, and I started working out, and that just completely changed who I was as a person, and came back in my junior year more in command of who I was, more of wanting to state my case of who I was. And I did more acting. I got more friends. I certainly dated more and had that experience, and felt more powerful in high school in my senior year as well. So those were my experiences, but littered throughout were some fantastic times with my friends, who some I'm still friends with today, and some great fun performances on stage, being in musicals, being in plays, directing a play, and getting involved with speech and drama and the Motto United Nations. Yes, super fucking nerd all the way to the end with Motto United Nations. Won some awards there. So my high school, although it was at times tough the first couple of years, overall, I felt like it's kind of set the foundation for how I would want to achieve things going forward in my life. What about you, Steve?
It's funny. There's a lot of elements that are really similar. So definitely there's a difference between freshman, sophomore, and junior, senior year.
Yeah.
I was really lacked social skills. I was very kind of nerdy and isolated coming out of junior high. Didn't know how to talk to people. Certainly didn't know how to talk to girls. I was a theater kid. So freshman year I was in theater class. I think I was in a play every year from second grade until senior of college.
Wow.
Like I never went a year where I wasn't acting in something.
Okay.
And and as you probably know from high school, not a lot of guys audition for the play. So it's kind of easy to get in
Very
to
true.
the play as a guy. So I was acting, I think socially I was kind of a floater, which
Okay.
is I was bullied when I was younger, but I wasn't
Right.
really bullied in high school. I was sort of kind of a theater kid, but not cool. Not
Okay.
one of the cool theater kids. Kind of a nerdy kid, but
Yes.
not one of the really, president of the chess club or anything. I kind of knew some cool people, but I wasn't I just kind of floated around.
Yeah.
And tried not to have anyone pay too much attention to me, and then things did change junior, senior year when I became friends with first Jeff Johnson and then with other people. Kind of had this group of friends, some of whom I'm still with friends today.
Yeah.
And it's funny. Luke asked if we had any amusing anecdotes, and I was like, God, what do I have amusing anecdotes? And then I went, oh yes, I do. So here are two linked stories I'll try to tell fairly quickly. So junior year, I had gotten my driver's license, and it wasn't my car, but I had access to a Toyota Corolla, 1981 Toyota Corolla station wagon. And so I was the first one to drive. So we drove to Berkeley with my friend George Shelton and who was a sophomore, and this girl Chrissy Radzikowski, who I had a big crush on. And maybe there's someone else in the car, I don't know. So we drive to Berkeley, we eat some Blondie's pizza, maybe we got some ice cream or something, and then we drive home, and it's 9:00 at night or whatever it is when you're 16 or 17.
Yeah.
And George says, hey, why don't you drop Chrissy off first and then drop me off? And I'm like, George, I'm gonna drop you off first.
Don't cock block, son.
And he was like, no, why don't you drop? Because then you could circle around back and drop me. I'm like, George, I'll drop you off first. So I drop him off. He lived right near a street that was called, I think, Mara Vista. And then I go to Chrissy's house, park my red station wagon in front of the house, and I go, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna ask a girl out. Never asked a girl out before. Go up to her, and in my totally fumbling, I kind of like you, and maybe I was thinking that sometime you and I could, I don't know if you wanted to, but if you didn't want to, that's be okay. And I think that for 10 minutes, she says, no, I just want to be friends, because that was, pretty typical for me. And then as I'm walking back to my car, a police car comes screeching around the corner, sirens, flashing lights, pulls over, grabs me, slams me against the car, and says, what were you doing? You're driving like a crazy person. I'm like, what do you mean? And they say, where did you come from? And I go, well, I was in Berkeley, and then I drove. What streets were you on? I was like, I was on Tiburon Boulevard, and then I was on Paradise Drive, blah, blah, blah. And they said, you didn't go anywhere else, like Mar West? Now, George lived right near Mara Vista.
Yeah.
And I went, I was freaked out, and I went,
of course.
I guess. And they're like, oh, now you guess. So now you're talking about it. And they go, you're under arrest. And I go, what? And they put me up against the car. They handcuff me.
Holy crap.
They say, and I say, what? For what? And they said, for reckless driving. We saw you going 60 miles an hour on Mar West. And I look up as I'm being, they put their hand on my head and put me in the car. And I look up, and there is Chrissy's mom and her whole family are watching me be arrested. And then they were really just trying to scare the crap out of me. And they kind of yelled at me, and I said, no, I was here. I was talking to this girl. Like, what's her name? And I went, Chrissy. And they said, what's her last name? And her last name's Radzikowski. Right. I couldn't remember what her last name was. They're like, oh, so you're talking to some girl and you don't even know her last name. I'm like, yeah, I don't know her last name. Wow. And they said, well, if we go and knock on this door and they don't know who you are, you're going to jail. And I'm like, okay. And so the police went and knocked on the Radzikowski's door, talked to Chrissy's mom.
Right.
And then they come back and they say, all right, just this time we're going to let you go with just a speeding ticket or reckless driving ticket, but they didn't take me in. So then I go, okay. And they write out the ticket. And now I'm driving home.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I realized I'd never even been on the street that they were talking about.
Right.
Is that they had seen another red car. I had been talking to Chrissy Razakowski for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
They'd seen another red car, followed that car, and then seen my red car and thought it was me.
Right. So they lost that other red car and thought you were the red car.
Exactly.
Wow.
So then I get home and my parents are sitting up in bed because the police have called them to tell them what I've been doing. And at that point, I'm like, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. My dad calls up the police and we go back to the police department at 2 a.m.
Oh my God.
And explain like this wasn't me. And they tear up the ticket. And this, I'm still angry. My dad made me write a thank you note to the police. That's how straight and narrow my dad was, to say thank you for letting me off for this thing that I hadn't done. Wow. So that's part one of the story. Part two of the anecdote. It's junior prom. So who do I want to ask to junior prom? Chrissy Razakowski.
Wow.
So I go to her and she's a sophomore and I'm a junior. And she goes, well, we can go just as friends, but only if you get a date for George, the same guy who I had left off. And I went, she went, if we can get a date for George. And then there's another junior whose name was Christine, who we found, and she didn't have a date. So she was George's date because George was a sophomore. And I went with Chrissy Razakowski. Get to the prom. George and Chrissy are dancing a lot.
Oh, damn.
Then we go to, we're going to spend the night at the beach to watch the sunrise because on the West Coast.
Right.
So we go out to the beach, we built a fire. We're sitting there. We got blankets and stuff. George and Chrissy disappear. And I'm left alone with this girl who I didn't know all night. And that was my first kiss, and that's my first girlfriend.
Oh, wow.
My first girlfriend came from us having George and Chrissy totally abandoned us. And both of our dates abandoned us at junior prom.
This is a When Harry Met Sally situation.
Totally.
Carrie Fisher and Bruno Kirby absconded in the taxi.
Yep. Yeah. Didn't work out as well.
Oh, well.
So that's my high school amusing anecdote.
Jeez, that's tough. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, a music anecdote. A lot of them involve, same thing, dating. A lot of them involve dating. So I don't know. I mean, as far as acting, I mean, I became an actor because I kind of wanted to be one in high school. And then I remember there was a Pirates of Penzance audition, and I remember standing by my locker and I was debating one way or the other. Do I do it or not do it? And I felt it was like the most important moment of my life at 16, I guess, as I was a junior. And I was like, do I do it? Do I not do it? Do I not do it? And my friend, Robert Doyle, I remember his name distinctly. He passed away a few years after high school. I remember it distinctly. He was like, dude, you got to do it. At least take a chance. Come on, I'll see you in there. I know I'll see you in there. And I'm standing by my locker. It's something like out of a movie moment because, I'm so fucking dramatic. I have the locker open and I'm like touching the locker with my finger. Like, do it do this? Do it do this? And then I go, if the buses leave by the time I'm done, and the buses start to leave, because we had the buses were like under they were on the second floor down on the ground. So you could see the buses under the, they're all lined up. And as soon as the school buses left, I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to do it. And I auditioned and I got into Pirates of Penzance. Robert did not. And so it's just so funny that he talked me into it. And this began my whole acting experience in high school. Obviously I walked away from it for a few years when I was in the military and then going to that first trip through college and then came back to it. And so it was something that always stayed inside me. But I think if I hadn't gone to that audition, I might have had a completely different life, like a completely different sliding doors kind of life, where I went off and did more of international relations and studied politics, studied all of that more, because that was also something that was a very big passion of mine in high school with Model United Nations. I was very, very into Model United Nations. I like the idea of negotiation. I like the idea of talking about these issues and exploring poverty and exploring nuclear missiles and exploring what's going on in the world and how we're affecting the world with the policies that we implement in other countries. And so I had interest in all of that, but in the end I didn't. I will say this, and I guess I should, I guess this is a story to tell. And it is my first time that I ever had sex. I guess I had it in high school. I was a 50. This is that transition time between sophomore and junior year. I'm working at a place called Job Lot Pushcart, and I am a stock boy. Essentially, it's my first job ever. I'd gotten where I was living in Virginia at my age at 50, I had to get permission from my parents to work a job over the summer. So it was like certain hours you were allowed to work. I had a driver's permit, so I could drive occasionally my mom or my dad's car to work at Potomac Mills Mall there in Virginia. And I was working at a place called Job Lot, which went extinct a few years later. But I met a girl there. She was in her late teens, early 20s, if I believe correctly. She had a child, and I had told her I was 18 years old. I had lied to her that I was 18 years old. I had been lifting, so I kind of radiated an older age. So
you were 15 or 16?
I was 15. I was 15 and I just was lifting. And so I radiated an older age by this time. And I was like coming into my own, kind of speaking my way and figuring out how to talk to women or girls. But so, so anyway, we get to know each other. We start to see each other. And the whole time I'm just lying to her that I'm 18. Like I'm making excuses. I'm saying that I'm living at home because I'm looking for my own place and all these stuff. At the same time, I'm friends with my friend Chris, who is taking me out and staying out late till 2 a.m. against my parents' wishes. My dad and I were having the most terrible summer, arguing with each other while I'm also lifting weights and doing all these kinds of things. There was a lot of rebellion, a lot of pushing back from the old ways of my life at that time. So, but what happens is my mother finds out about this relationship. And this is the story. My mother finds out that I'm dating this girl. Or this woman, I guess, because she's 19, 20. She's separated from her husband.
She has a child.
She has a child.
Yeah.
So my mom goes to the store one day. And this is why my mom is a piece of iron, man. She don't fuck around. She's sweet as candy, but she don't fuck around. And she gets in the line of this woman's line because she's a cashier at the place I'm working in the back. She's the cashier. She gets in the line and she does this whole song and dance with her about like, oh, hi. Yeah, hi. I don't know if you know me. I'm John's mom. And she was like, oh my God. Yes, John, he's fantastic. Very nice to meet you. I've seen your house. You have a lovely house outside. Blah, blah, blah. She's like, yeah. So do you know he's 15 years old? Totally outs me to her, completely outs me to her and tells the whole thing. And the girl, Michelle, she is just absolutely, completely flabbergasted by this. She takes me home that night, and I had no idea this interaction happened. She takes me home that night. Before we get to my house, she pulls over and she tells me the whole story. And I just burst out crying because I cared about her. I didn't want to lose her. I didn't weep or anything, but I just started crying like, no, I care about you. Please don't, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, do you understand? I could go to jail. This is statutory rape, what you put me in. It's statutory. I could go to jail. And so it was a whole thing that we kind of talked about. And we tried to date for another month. And I guess I'll save the first time sex story for some other thing. But that was the story there in high school. And crazy thing, 20 years later, when I had gone home one weekend, for Christmas, I happened to run into Michelle 20 years later. Now, when I had known her, she was like living with her mom with this child, breaking out of this thing. It looked to me like she was just like in a dead end life of hers and was going to end up. She had put herself and gone back to school, gotten 3 degrees, and was working for the Department of Homeland Security as one of the 4th or 5th people in line to be in charge of the department. Madness, absolute madness. And it was so great to see her. And I saw her again subsequently a few days later. We hung out, we had a great dinner. Definitely the chemistry was still there. You could tell we even talked about it. She was married with more kids at the time, but there was definitely that spark there. And no, it would have been terrible to act on it, but it was nice to know that it was still there all those years later, but that both of us had kind of gone on with our lives. And it was a great thing to remember and talk about. And I don't know where she is now. We kind of lost touch after the last few years, but like, it was great to have that memory with someone who ended up becoming did something really positive with their lives and fought against what could have been a dead end life. They fought to achieve more. And that was great.
So, I mean, that's a good amusing anecdote. It certainly blows
Oh,
my losing virginity story
no,
away.
no, no.
Not even worth saying. What I did want to say, but it's from a while ago. It's
Yeah,
crazy to me how different your and my backgrounds are,
yeah,
and how similar our experiences are. I went to Model UN. I
yeah.
loved it. Like speech and debate. I did that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And I had decided, because I'd always want to be an actor. And then sort of in beginning of high school, I went, oh, I'm never going to be that good, which is
Yeah,
sad thinking about it now, because I'd like, oh, I could have been a certain kind of actor. I couldn't
yeah.
be, Anthony Hopkins, but like, I knew how to act.
Right.
But what changed it was that's when I directed my first play. Was my
Mm,
senior year in high school, and it was a guy who is literally the most successful writer I know now. Had
yeah.
written a
Wow.
play. His name's Carl Gajdusek, and he wrote Oblivion, the Tom Cruise movie.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was the executive producer of Last Resort, that TV series. He
Mm,
created it. He's a producer on Stranger Things. I mean, the guy,
wow.
he is a really great and really successful writer.
Mhm.
And he had written this play, and there was just this sort of like, I wish someone could direct this play. And I'm like, well, I'll direct it.
Yeah.
I never thought about directing. I never thought about writing. And if Carl hadn't done this, and then I directed it, and then we did it again at the Bay Area Playwrights Festival as part of like the festival, and suddenly
Okay.
I'm like a director. And
Wow.
that's when I just realized that people like me could write something. I would never have written anything if I hadn't done this thing with Carl,
Right.
and so, and that sort of clued me in. Like, I was, as much as I still like acting, and if someone offered me
Yeah.
an acting part today, I would go, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Right.
But I was so much more comfortable directing. Like,
Yeah.
it just made sense for me at that point. And if I hadn't, and then I went, but I'm not going to do it. I'm become a lawyer. I got into Berkeley. I'm political science major. I was going to do law and politics, and that was what I was thinking about.
Right.
But I also did some stuff at the drama department, and then I did more stuff at the drama department, and then I did more stuff, and that I continued to do my poli-sci stuff, where I kind of was a good student, but
Right.
I was never not at the theater. And by junior year of college, I was like, I've completed 3/4 of the drama major.
Wow.
So I might as well become a double major, and
Yeah.
because I just, it's like, it's funny because we're working on Godfather stuff now. And it's just when I thought I was out, it pulled me back. I could not do it. I had
Yeah.
to I had to be part of creative things. I just
Yeah.
had to be,
There's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing. That's a 1,000% a good thing, man.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well,
So-
you got your money's worth there, kid. Whoever asked the question, you got.
It
your
was
money's
Luke.
worth.
Luke asked the question.
Oh, that's
So-
right, Luke. It's been so long. We were talking about it. I forgot.
So Luke,
Thank you, Luke.
We got into some good stuff, and thank you to all our patrons for all your support. We couldn't make the show without you. We love having these conversations with Cinephile Shorts. So put your suggestions in, and maybe yours will be the next topic we discuss on Cinephile Shorts.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cine-Files Shorts. I am one of your hosts here. I am the outlaw John Roque, joined by my brother in film arms, Steve Morris. And I have presented this. This isn't something that any of the fans have suggested or any of the patrons have suggested, but this is something that came across the wire here. And I wanted to, it came up right as we were recording another short, and I thought it'd be a great thing for Steve and I to discuss. We rarely get to dive into the concepts and theory of film that isn't connected to a film we're reviewing on the Cine-Files. So this is fun to do here. Martin Scorsese just recently, this is based on a Martin Scorsese essay he just wrote for the March 2021 edition of Harper's Magazine. He's speaking about his love for director Federico Fellini and his incredible work. It's titled Il Maestro. That's the name of the article. And Steve, I wanted to get your thoughts on his comments here throughout the article. So, and we're taking this from an IndieWire synopsis of what he wrote in this essay. He's talking about streamers, and he does acknowledge that, like, without Netflix, there'd be no Irishman. Without Apple, he wouldn't be able to shoot Killers of the Flower Moon with Leonardo DiCaprio, which he's doing now. But he writes, quote, "The art of cinema is being systematically devalued, sidelined, demeaned, and reduced to its lowest common denominator by conceptualization of films as, quote, content. As recently as 15 years ago, the term content was heard only when people were discussing the cinema on a serious level, and it was contrasted with and measured against form. Then gradually it was used more and more by the people who took over media companies, most of whom knew nothing about the history of the art form or even cared enough to think that they should. Content became a business term for all moving images, a David Lean movie, a cat video, a Super Bowl commercial, a superhero sequel, a series episode. It was linked, of course, not to the theatrical experience, but to home viewing on the streaming platforms that have come to overtake the movie-going experience, just as Amazon overtook physical stores. Steve, you're writing a book on directing. You teach directing. What are your initial thoughts on Scorsese's comments here as he presents them?
So I feel very much about let's just start with the word content.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very much about the word content the way, and I know we've discussed this, that you sometimes feel about the word the talent. Go get the talent.
Yes.
There's a thing that sounds okay about it, but is really commodifying in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's funny because I haven't done these meetings in a while, but I can't tell you how many meetings I had with some company that said, we really need to accumulate content. And that is so insulting. And because it's just like, we have to fill a space. Like, we need to have material. We don't care if it's good material. We don't care what kind of material. We just want to fill it up with content. It's like, fast food pouring at you, or just crappy toy, whatever it is, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I'm 100% in agreement with Scorsese in this area.
Mm-hmm.
That offends me. It really bothers me. Just like if someone said, I need to build a toy for kids. I don't really care what it is.
Right.
Or I want to make a kids TV show. I don't really care what it is. As long as it sells my toys, it's fine. Right. Well, that's why we get so much bad crap, and we're continually overwhelmed by content. And I'm sure you've seen this. I mean, like, I had meetings with travel companies who wanted travel-ish content. And all these companies that don't really do film, but wanted to have some stuff, video online that they could sell. So yes, in this area, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. And he goes further to say that the packaging of all moving images as equitable content, quote, has created a situation which everything is presented to the viewer on a level playing field, which sounds democratic, but isn't. If further viewing is, quote, suggested by algorithms based on what you've already seen, and the suggestions are based only on subject matter or genre, then what does that do to the art of cinema? Curating isn't undemocratic or elitist, a term that is now used so often that it's become meaningless. It's an act of generosity. You're sharing what you love and what has inspired you. The best streaming platforms such as the Criterion Channel and Mubi and traditional outlets such as TCM are based on curating. They're actually curated. Algorithms, by definition, are based on calculations that treat the viewer as a consumer and nothing else. Steve.
Well, first of all, what is the Cine-Files?
Right.
It is curated. We're saying these are great films. You should watch them. It's fine. There are things in what Scorsese said that I'm going to strongly disagree with, but so far I'm with him because, well, here's where the point that I think he misses, which is that it's not that it's treating us as consumers. Right. It's that these companies treat us as products because they make money off of advertising. Mm-hmm. And so what they're trying to do is get you to stay on for a minute longer. They're not trying to give you a profound experience. In fact, a profound experience you'll probably have, and then you'll stop watching because you're done. Yeah. But if they show you more extreme things, more intense things, we'll always go to fast food and sugar and candy and to eat those things rather than the healthy things. We'll always do it. And so they keep feeding this to us. And this is how the algorithms work. And it's not just for film or for cinema. It's just dangerous in general because it continually pulls us. I mean, this is how you get QAnon. This is how you get all these crazy conspiracy theories, because the content keeps pulling us to more extreme content and not healthy content. So again, I'm with him.
Well, I'm a little bit cynical on the comments that he's making here, Steve, because what he's essentially saying is the consumers have no free will of choice. They're presented this, then therefore it's being pushed a certain way by the companies. He's very, how can I say this correctly? I don't want to, maybe I'll say smart. He's very smart in that he's not going after the ticket buyers or the viewers that would consume his content. He's very careful not to insult them. He's blaming these nameless, faceless companies that, by the way, he has done movies for. Just because you say, now I recognize that I've worked for Apple and Netflix, it doesn't mean that you can go ahead and shit on Apple and Netflix and that it's okay. It's like saying, no offense, but your mom sucks. It's no, just because you said no offense does not mean the next thing you say is okay for you to say, and no one can take an issue with it. And I think he's being a bit self-preservationist by going after the faceless companies that are supposedly manipulating people. I curated my life. I did the research. I went after movies because I was interested in finding the greatest movies. I went to the library. I bought Premiere Magazine. Human beings are capable of curating their lives, curating the movies they want to see. And the Cine-Files section of society, Steve, has never been the overwhelming section of society. It's always been a smaller piece of the pie because we appreciate this medium that most people just kind of want to go someplace to lose their minds for a couple of hours and then get back to their daily lives. Those of us who are cinephiles look at films in a completely different way. And we're not the majority. We aren't. And I think that's what is underlying in his thesis is this idea that somehow people are being pushed away from great content and are just made to believe that Lawrence of Arabia is the same as a cat video, which I think is inherently false in my opinion.
How good a cat video? I mean, is it really cute?
Can it light a match? I don't know. Is it the lawyer cat? I mean, that's true too.
I think you've put your finger on this is where I agree with much of what he's saying, and then I start to split off because so first of all, you are different. Like most people didn't do what you did or what I did and get obsessed about these films. That's not
what a lot of our listeners did. Yeah,
right. But Martin Scorsese's different too. Like most people when they were kids weren't going to see every movie they could find, every Italian film, every all that stuff like he was doing. Most kids weren't like that, so they don't grow up to be Martin Scorsese and to be the curators for other people. And I think he's lumping a bunch of stuff together that isn't the same. Because I think so. First of all, I don't have a feeling of cinema, as in what you would go see on a big screen in a movie theater, is better than what you would see on a small screen. I think there is crap that you go see in a movie theater, and I think there is unbelievable artistry done for TVs. So like I think Netflix has put out Queen's Gambit was the most recent one, which was like that was in my mind, that's cinema. It was phenomenal filmmaking, great acting, great script, beautifully shot. The costumes are amazing. The sets are amazing. It was just really, really, really good. And so like saying this idea, and there are great shows on Apple. There's great, Ted Lasso is an amazing show. There's great shows on Amazon. They also put out a bunch of stuff that maybe isn't so good, but that's no different. In our last short, we were talking about, I don't know which one will come out first, but we were talking about sequels and B movies. Yeah. It's not like the movie studios weren't putting out tons of crap throughout all this time. They were. Yeah. Where I agree with Scorsese is that one of the differences, there was a time where getting to see the good stuff, like the cinephile stuff, was hard. Yeah. Because Citizen Kane didn't play anywhere for 20 years, And then you would hear there was a screening at some theater down in Brooklyn and you would go to see it and it would be a pilgrimage. Or you'd go, like you used to have to go to the record store and there was the guy at the record store and he would clue you into that really good indie band that nobody would ever heard of. And that was really cool. Today, all things are available all the time. Yep. There is so much media available. And what happens, and this is where I agree, the cat video is competing with Lawrence of Arabia and more people are watching the cat video. There's just absolutely mind-numbing crap that has been viewed 90 million times. Yeah. So if that's what he's talking about, I agree with him. If he's talking about problems with streaming services, come on.
Yeah, agreed with you on that one. But that's always been the case, by the way. More people have seen Major League than have seen, or Back to the Future, rather, than have seen Lawrence of Arabia. More people that have seen populist mainstream entertainment than have seen the classics like Lawrence of Arabia. That's the truth. And that's always been the truth. That's what.
But wait. Hold on. This is where I disagree. is that I totally agree with what you said, but the cat video is not Back to the Future. Back to the Future is a great movie.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I meant like,
You know what I mean?
mainstream entertainment, I guess is what okay, fine. I don't know. What do you want to do? What would you think that is not, there's got to be a film that everybody watches, but is not considered in the same vein as Lawrence of Arabia.
Well,
That's what I'm trying to get at. Films like that.
I could talk about a series
Back to the Future is totally a classic. You're right.
I could talk about a series that you, but so two things. So first of all, I will give you some films because it's movies that I know you love. But again, going back to the cat video, there is so much crap that literally millions and millions people are watching these things all the time. That are mind-numbing and horrible. But there are also movies that are extremely popular that many people think aren't that good. And I know you're big fans of the Transformers movies. That's a perfect example of movies that have made tons of money. Yes. But that's where I totally agree with you. That's always happened. There have always been crowd-pleasing, financially successful films that people saw more than Italian neorealism.
Right.
You know,
we were the first nerds. I don't care what anybody says. Before Dungeons and Dragons, there were films. We were the first nerds. Sure. The nerds, the caveman Neanderthal nerds were the film lovers. We created that little mini society of like 20 people to talk about films with. We had to find each other in crowds, in colleges and high schools, even in middle school, possibly. We had to find each other, and you had to look at it. And it was before D&D, before all this other shit. It was that. And even going back to the 20s and 30s, they had those little mini film society groups or critics groups. They understood the nerddom of loving film. To me, that has always been the foundational thing of nerddom, is film loving first, in my opinion. And when he comes for this situation, he says, and I think, but what I think in the next quote is where I think Scorsese completely loses me, because I don't understand anyone who can claim commerce over art. Art over commerce in the film business. He says, in the movie business, which is now the mass visual entertainment business, it's always been that, by the way. The emphasis is always on the word business. Yes, it has always been on the word business.
Always, yeah.
And value is always determined by the amount of money to be made from any given property. In that sense, everything from Sunrise to La Strada 2001 is now pretty much wrung dry and ready for the, quote, art film swim lane on a streaming platform. Those of us who know the cinema and its history have to share our love and our knowledge with as many people as possible. We have to make it crystal clear to the current legal owners of these films that they amount to much, much more than mere property to be exploited and then locked away. They are among the greatest treasures of our culture, and they must be treated accordingly. I suppose we have to refine our notions of what cinema is and what it isn't. Federico Fellini is a good place to start. You can say a lot of things about Fellini's movies, but here's one thing that is incontestable: they are cinema. Fellini's work goes a long way toward defining the art form. And this is where Scorsese loses me. Because his argument that it's maybe there was a fantasy time where it wasn't about business. Bullshit. From the beginning, it was always about business. It was always about money. There's a reason these studios signed these actors to multi-film contracts. There's a reason studios were churning out like 200 films a year, not like what you see now. They were churning them out because they were trying to make as much money as possible, get people into the theaters to spend their hard-earned dimes, to lose themselves for an hour and a half or an hour or even 2 hours if you're pushing it in a film. And this idea that they're being locked away, this is like those people that came out and said, I'm being muzzled on my 7 podcasts and my 4 shows and my 9 channels. And the fact that I'm still speaking in front of a microphone as a senator in the Congress, I'm being muzzled. Bullshit. It's lies. Nothing is being locked away. These films are actually more accessible than they've ever fucking been. And so to me, this drives you nuts, this idea of an old man yelling that they're taking away my stuff. And that's not what's happening at all.
I think, of course.
And I love Scorsese, by the way.
Of course, me too. So, but it is, he comes from a rarefied place, and he is a specific kind of person who came up a certain way. And I think what he's pointing to is the fact that things have changed. And you're right. He's right. Things have changed.
Yeah.
The fact that Hollywood is a business and movies are a business, that hasn't changed.
Right.
That's the same. What has changed is just the landscape of media. And we had this conversation, I remember, with Scott Manson talking about, I kept trying to articulate a thing that I never succeeded, which is the idea of, as there's more and more stuff that is preserved, more and more stuff will get lost.
Yes.
Because there's just not, because when we were kids, there were 3 networks. There were a couple of UHF channels. There was, a few movie theaters near us.
Yeah.
We maybe had a video store once once VCRs got introduced. There was a few radio stations, and for the most part, you watched whatever was on.
Yeah.
And so then when you discovered, Lawrence of Arabia or Citizen Kane or something like that, it was like, oh my God, what a discovery. And you would seek it out. Now, there is millions and millions and millions of hours of media available at all time.
Yeah.
And so, the fact is that not that many people are going to watch Sunrise. It's a movie that we've talked about doing on the Cine-Files, and maybe we will, but there's just so much stuff. I mean, it's like how much new TV that you hear is great, which a lot of it has come out in the last month. We just can't. So people aren't gonna, and do I mourn that the way Scorsese does? Yeah, I do. And do I agree that we like, this is our mission, is to do just what he's saying, to preserve and throw a spotlight on these films that are valuable. But the fact is that most people are not going to go watch, some obscure, they're not going to go watch Fellini. Most, kids my son's age are not going to watch all the Fellini films because there's too much stuff, and that's too bad. But people like Martin Scorsese, people like you and me, people who love cinema are going to seek it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I think. And Steve, what we have now with these streaming services are portable video stores. So in essence, what we do when we're navigating and searching through these streaming platforms rather, is walking through our video stores. You're walking through a virtual video store to find the movie that you want to watch. But I always think, and this is why I think this is a little bit cynical of Scorsese, it is always up to the consumer to decide what he or she wants to watch. And if there were enough consumers who wanted to go back and preserve classic movies and watch classic movies and talk about classic movies, then he probably wouldn't be complaining about this. But this is the number. We've always been a smaller part of the majority. We've always been that. And so what he's complaining about, I get the genesis of it, but he's also a little cynical, and he's not attacking the people who are allowing themselves to be pushed away from cinema and veer towards other things like a cat video or what have you. And I think he's a little bit undercutting some of the people who can do a cat video and also watch Lawrence of Arabia. And I think there's a lot of people who do that nowadays. And the older generation can't conceive of how the younger generation is viewing everything, is consuming everything, because they are, from the birth, they are able to focus on multiple different levels of media at once, all at once. It's essentially trying to watch 9 televisions and 9 different programs at the same time. That's what these kids are able to do from such young ages now. And so maybe the cinephile situation, some of them get lost, but that's why it's always been up to the person's own personal desire to become a cinephile. There's a joy in the effort in becoming a cinephile, Steve. The journey is what matters.
I agree. And I think one of the points he makes that I agree with is there are things that algorithms and popularity will deliver to you that a curator, a fine critic, will not.
Right.
And there are things that the curator and the fine critic can deliver to you that those things are not. There's a book, this is a strange analogy, but I think it's Fareed Zakaria who wrote a book that was something about democracy. And what he was basically talking about was where just whatever people vote for isn't necessarily the best thing. Is that, and one of them was the difference. There was I remember one of his examples was there was a Book of the Month Club that you could, in the 50s. And the Book of the Month Club was decided by 3 famous authors, 2 professors of literature, 6 critics who are of literature, and they would get together and talk about the greatest books of that year. And then they would choose these 12 books. And at one point, the company that did it, and I don't know what publishing company is, says, you know what, instead of doing that, let's just pick the 12 most popular books. So whatever people are buying, those are the best books, and therefore we'll send those as the 12 books. And the Book of the Month Club, which was a hugely successful business, went in the toilet. because what is popular isn't the same thing. Is that sometimes you need a guide. Sometimes you need the guy at the record store to point you to the indie band that you never heard about.
Right.
Sometimes that's what you need, and you get a different thing out of that. It's why I think what is the top box office, of every weekend news, like, oh, this is number one. That's a sign of something. Yeah. It's not a sign of it necessarily being the best film. Yeah. It's just a sign of that's what most people want to see.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening, and especially for our patrons who, give us so much love every month and support what we're doing here on the show as we curate the Cine-Files and, of course, present and talk about some of these great classic films. And we're not forcing you to watch anything. We're out here trying to present to you these beautiful films that you can enjoy and watch and reappreciate with us, not through us, with us. And I think having conversations like this are really powerful to take a moment to let you guys know how much we love films and how much we love discussing the concept and the theory of film and the history of the film and the film industry as well. So yeah, read the article. It's in, oh God, I dropped it out again. It's coming up here on March 2021.
Well, the full article I think is in Harper's.
Yeah, that's it. Harper's. It's going to be in Harper's in the March 2021 edition. El Maestro. Go and read that there. For Steve Morris, I'm John Roca, and thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the Cine-Files Shorts. Take care.
Hello and welcome to another Cine-Files Short. My name is Steve Morris, here with my partner, John Roca.
Hello.
And today our question comes from Carl Vogel. No relation, I assume. He says, Cinephile Short suggestion, good ? Student films on the podcast. Steve occasionally refers to his students, usually he's describing in a caring mentorly way, thanks Carl, how their films are kind of bad, not just kinda, frequently really bad. Do I sound caring and mentory? This has gotten me interested in how one makes a good student film. Students lack not only resources like time and money, but also knowledge and experience. What are some of the ways that good student films work around those constraints? Is it similar to just being a good budget film director, or is it a different skill set? Can you describe some experiences of examples of good student films that you've seen, or what are some interesting evolutions or improvements you've seen in students over time in general? I'm always intrigued by the tidbits to get about Steve's life as a teacher. So I'd really be interested in hearing topics in that vein you might want to discuss. Thanks so much for the podcast. You guys are awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I realized while reading that I might not be that good on a teleprompter.
Well, it takes a skill to get good at a teleprompter, my man. It's not easy for anybody who has to read stuff overall. But let's get to the questions here. There's like 7 questions about this. What's your feeling about what he's asking you about these constraints in all student films?
Here's the first thing I would say is that the thing that I think is most shocking to students is that making movies is really, 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 really hard. It's just hard to make a movie that works. And a lot of the things that they, particularly in the very beginnings, they don't even understand the questions that they need to ask. Like they don't understand what is required. The first thing is that they don't know what a story is.
Yeah.
So, and this is one of the hard things is that where I taught, and most film schools, particularly at the beginning, the student is writing and directing their own film. And it's like, they might not have that writing skill set, so just figuring out, and like the first semester in my school, they have to make five or 6 films. So that's a lot of stories to figure out in a very, very short amount of time. So that it's just really hard.
Okay.
The other thing I would say is there's a way of storytelling. And the question I continually ask the way I teach my class is the students will pitch their film usually before they pitch it, before they go shoot it. And I think it's really important in terms of learning to tell your own story, because you got to be able to tell your story to actors. You got to be able to explain to the cinematographer, but it really exposes what's wrong with it and why it's not working. So frequently, like the first assignment at my school is to do a mise en scène film, which means a film in one shot. And so they'll say like, okay, there's this person in a window and they're looking out at this guy on the street, and the guy on the street can't get the key in the lock of their car because they have the wrong key. And I'll say, how are we seeing this? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you got one shot. So how can you be up in the house with the person looking out the window and down at the car and see an insert of a key not going into a lock? It's not possible to shoot these, you know? And so frequently students are shooting things where they don't know, they don't have the skill set to know how to tell the actual story.
Right,
you know?
right.
You've been on student film sets, right?
Yeah, I've shot 7 student films in my life. A bulk of them before I left Tallahassee to come to Los Angeles. The way it worked at Florida State, it was crazy. I tried to get in to be cast in student films for the first 2 years I was there. And then the last year I was there, one student put me in a film, and all of a sudden I got like 5 or 6 in a row because other people saw me on sets and saw my performance and were like, will you come do my film? And then it was another set, will you come do my film? So it was that kind of thing, piece by piece. So it was interesting to watch so many different student film directors. And Tallahassee is Florida State rather, is a good university, has a good reputation for film directors, for producing film directors that come out of there. And I remember that it was so interesting to be with different types of directors from different nationalities. Like I was directed by a Brazilian exchange student, by an Argentinian student, by American students, by female directors, male directors. It was so interesting to see their tact and how they approached it. And as an actor, you know the ones who don't see you as movable props, and actually see you as a person who should be collaborated with. And I've always appreciated that. And then when you're watching them, because obviously I was older, so because I was 27 when I went back to college, so I was watching them when I would sit off camera and see the ones who actually understood how to run a set and then what shots they wanted for the entire student film. Because most of the time when they shoot a student film, at least my experience, they're shooting it over 24 hours or they're shooting it over 3 days. It's not a lot of time. And so you have to kind of be tight and know what you want and understand the angles, understand the shots, whose point of view. So it was certainly an interesting experience watching who were the ones that were on top of it and who were the ones that were overwhelmed by it. And who knew how to talk to their crew and who didn't, you know?
That reflects everything that I've seen too. And there's so many things that a director has to do that students aren't really prepared to do. One of the big ones is being, to quote George W. Bush, the decider. Is that people go like, oh, I want to direct a movie, but they don't really understand what that entails. And so I would spend a lot of time on sets with students, and something would happen and the cinematographer would come up and say, hey, do you want this or this? Or the AD would come up and say, we're running out of time. We gotta cut some shots. They say, what should we do, to the director? And the director turns to me. And it happens all the time where they just kind of look over at me with kind of a deer in the headlights. And they say, well, what do I do? And I'm like, well, that's up to you. And they're like, no, but what should I do now? And I'm like, you have to decide, you know, and they're really, a lot of them, I would say 30-40% are just not ready for that. Yeah. That everyone, 10, 15, 20 people on the set are looking at them and waiting for a decision, and they don't know what the answer is, you know? And then, so what I will do in that situation as a teacher is really explain the options. Yeah. And try to explain, like, here, because one of the big things that's important to understand is there are variables and there are unknowns. And so frequently one of the most basic decisions a director has to make is, do we move on? So I've shot the take of you. I did your close up. I've done 2 takes. I think, man, John was pretty good. I think there's something better, but we're looking at the clock and the sun went behind a cloud, and do we move on or do we not, or do another take? And that can be a really hard decision because, and so frequently I'm explaining to the student, like, this is where you are. It's 11:30 in the morning. The sun's going to be down at 4:30. According to your shot list, you have 12 more shots. It took you 2 hours to get your first 2 shots. And then asking the question, how do you feel about what you saw? And the other thing that happens is that directors frequently, they don't realize they can change things. Like the DP will set up a shot and they'll go, okay. And I'll say, do you like that shot? And like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, is that the framing that you wanted? Because that's not what you had in the storyboard. Yeah. And they go, no, I'd rather it was something else. I was like, well, why aren't you talking to your DP about changing the shot? You know, or actor gives a performance and I'll go, and they'll go, okay, I guess we're moving on. It's like, wait, they didn't say the lines right. Are you okay with that? And the director will frequently go, well, what did they say? I'm like, well, you needed to be paying attention to know what they said, you
exactly.
know? And in particular, talking to actors. I mean, as you know, I'm sure you've had directors who had no fucking idea how to talk to you.
Oh my God. Yeah. And because I was older, like I said, I would pull them aside and be like, listen, you need to tell me exactly what it is you're looking for here, what you want to accomplish from the scene, and what I've got to bring into it and bring out of it. So meet me halfway here and I'll give you what you want. And trust me, this will cut down on time. And so I had to kind of have a couple of moments with directors like that because I wasn't a 21-year-old kid or a 20-year-old kid in college, you know, not sure how to speak about my craft. I was like clear about what it was, how to approach it. And nothing irritates me more than directors who don't know how to speak to actors. It drives me out of my fucking mind because I'm like, this should be the number one thing you're taught after you get the technical stuff down. This is the number one thing you should be taught, how to speak to actors. Because like I said, it will save you time on a set like nobody's business. It'll save you time.
What's so bizarre, because in my opinion, I'm good at talking to actors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say so. We haven't worked with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And part of it is that I was in theater. I acted in my first play when I was 8 years old. You know, I acted a ton. And so that stuff was kind of natural. But at my school, when I went to USC, you were not required to take an acting class. You were required to take an editing class, cinematography class. Yeah. You were take writing classes, producing classes, sound classes, all elements of the movie set, except you were not required to take an acting class and you were not required to take a music class. Some directors chose to take an acting class. I didn't because I felt like I was better served elsewhere. It's a really, I mean, as you know, far better than me, acting's a weird job.
Yeah.
And frequently, like one of the things students don't usually understand is they don't understand subtext. And so A, they don't know how to write it. And B, if they're doing a scene that someone else, like one of the assignments that we would do is they would have to direct a scene that was like a professional scene from a real movie or a real TV show. Right. And almost always they wouldn't understand the subtext of the scene. Mm-hmm. They would everything's at face value. So like one of the scenes, if we ever do this, it's going to be really weird. But one of the scenes they would do is in Treasure of the Sierra Madre. And there's a scene like where they're counting up the gold. And it's when Humphrey Bogart is starting to lose it. And he's starting to distrust everybody. Yeah. And what he's doing in the scene is saying, I'm totally trustworthy, but you know, what if someone wasn't trustworthy?
Yeah.
And my students would always direct it at face value, believing that every person in the scene is saying the truth. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, everything is underneath. It's actually almost all the opposite of what they're saying. Like the point is that Humphrey Bogart is the one that you can't trust.
Right.
You know, and they would have such trouble figuring that out. And if you don't understand that, how could you communicate to an actor?
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. It's so essential. And I imagine that's what you're teaching these people in your classes, you know, how to look at all the angles of what you're doing. Because just like anything else, people want to, what's the easiest way I can get this done? What's the quickest way I can get this done? And the truth is, you've got to understand all the moving parts, and that is what's going to make it quicker. That's the ironic part, Steve, is, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here because I know you teach this. It's like, once you learn everything and get it down, that actually is going to cut time. The fact that you want to cut time by just learning the basics of everything is not actually going to lead to a better product or lead to a quicker accomplishment of your shoot. You know, knowing everything or having a really good knowledge of all the different facets will allow you to speak in shorthand to the people you need to speak to get what you need to get out of what they're doing on your set, you know?
First of all, you're never speaking out of turn. I think you're an expert on this stuff. I mean, you've been around this world as long as I have, you know?
True.
Like, And you've experienced a different set of stuff than me. So I always respect whatever you're bringing. You're 100% right. And what's weird about learning directing as an art is that there's a sort of a parallel education. There is a technical craftsmanship, administration, budgeting, efficiency education, which has nothing to do with art, but is what is necessary to know in order to make the art. And then there is the emotional, aesthetic, story thing. And you could have the best story stuff in the world, and if you don't know how to organize a shoot, it's never going to make it on film. And you could be the best technical person in the world, and if you don't know what the hell a story is, it's going to be terrible. One of the things I'm teaching is all about efficiency. It's all about how do you get everything you want in the smallest possible time, and in general, it's planning ahead, and it's going through the moves and looking at the order that you're going to shoot things in and figuring out how to do it with as few shots as possible in the most efficient way as possible. Like every time you have to turn the room, which means I'm lighting one direction, then I turn around to light the other direction for two people are talking to each other. Well, that's 45 minutes to turn the room, depending on the complexity of your set. It could be 3 hours. And so you don't want to do that too much, because if you have 3 times you turn the room, well, that eats up almost half your day. So figuring out how to do all that stuff, efficiency is really important. Artistically, the thing I've started to ask lately, and it really confuses my students, but it's become so critical to me, is I'm continually asking, wait, what is this scene about? And they look at me like, what do you mean? I don't understand the question. And I'm like, what is the scene about? And what's so funny is I'm asking the most basic possible thing. Right. And frequently the students think I'm asking something that's more complicated than what it is. Is like, this scene is about this person is in love with that person, and this person isn't interested in them romantically. That's the scene. And then what you do is every shot, every line is about supporting that idea.
Right.
It isn't, and this is what's so hard to understand about making a film. You're not just photographing the story. Like if it says this person goes into the room, they wash their face, they drop the towel on the floor, they look under something and they see a gun underneath the sink. Well, you don't just set up the camera and photograph that. You need to, because you need to actually find ways to do it that actually tells a dramatic story. There was in the first film I wrote, which was called Stonebrook, which Seth Green was in. I was very frustrated with the cut. And you know me, I have strong opinions about things. I didn't direct the film and I didn't edit the film. And I'm watching it with my sister. And there was a scene where a character makes a really important life choice. And it was mostly in a wide shot. And I paused the scene as I'm watching it on VHS with my sister. And I said, it's so frustrating because you don't really see him make that choice. And my sister said, no, I saw him make the choice. I know that's what was happening. I'm like, I know that you know that's what was happening, but you didn't feel it. She's like, yeah, I did. I was like, no, you don't understand. Because you didn't, because to me, it's like you needed to have the close up and the pause so you could see the change on the person's face and see what the thing that they saw and see their reaction to it to have the emotional experience. And that's what is the scene about? Like, how do we get that out of the scene?
Right. Right. Yeah, not an easy thing to do, that's for sure. It almost reminds me of that we've been recording Moneyball, where he says, "What's the problem?" No, Grady, what is the actual problem? And so I know you know the basic idea, but what is that? What is the foundation of this basic idea that we've got to convey? What do you want the audience to feel? What do you want to have the audience understand is happening here? So
here's an example I don't normally play tricks on my students, but occasionally I do. So here's one of them, is that in a camera blocking class. So just talking about how do we decide where we're going to put the camera? Wide shots, close-ups, everything in one moving tracking shot, everything divided up. How do we do it? And I ask, this is what I say to my students. Okay, here's a scenario. There's a man and a woman are in bed. The man gets a text on his phone, and he gets up, gets out of bed, and walks out of the room. How do you film it? And my students come up with all sorts of interesting, the camera's above them in a top-down shot, and then it slowly pushes in, and then it tilts up and follows them out. Or I do a master, and then a close-up and a close-up and an insert. Or the camera's on a dolly that tracks circular around the bed, moving into his face, into an over-the-shoulder with her. And I'm like, these are all really interesting shots. almost inevitably,
Yes.
no one in the class asks what is going on in the scene. What is the relationship? Is it two old people who have been married for 75 years? Is it the guy's having an affair and he just got a text from his wife? Is it that he got a text that his kid is in the hospital? Is it that this is a one night stand and he realizes he doesn't, is it, is she awake? Is she asleep? Do they, and it's like, what is the scene about? Figuring out where to put the camera should be based on what am I trying to tell? What is the story? Right. And this is a thing my students struggle with. One other thing that Carl asks about money. Money's a big deal. And it's so weird. I don't know if there's any other school program where rich people have such an advantage. Because if you go to medical school, once you pay to get into the school, everybody's experiences are the same. Someone with a lot of money can't bring their money to bear on anatomy class. But I've had students, like for a thesis project, where one student in my class was spending, I kid you not, $35,000 on this short film. Wow. And another student was desperately trying to, working two jobs and going into credit card debt to get $800 to make their film.
Wow.
And those two films I have to grade. And there is no way the person with $800 is going to be able to do the same things as the person with $35,000.
Right.
But I will tell you, I have often given much better grades to that $800 film. And that $800 film was way, way, way better. There is one $35,000 film that a student made that looked amazing. Like it was a zombie movie, and the zombie makeup could have been in Walking Dead. It looked great. The lighting, they took over a whole street, had multiple cars going by. It was outdoor at night. He had big, huge lights. It looked fantastic. I literally have no idea what the movie was about. When I saw the script, I was like, I don't understand why this characters are saying this. I don't understand what's happening. He barely shot any coverage. He only had one shot for each scene. So when I'm in post with him, this is just so terrible. It's like I'm in post and my job is to watch a cut or watch a scene and then give suggestions. And I every once in a while, and this was one of the cases, like, I don't know what to tell you. I did give some suggestions. It was rewrite an entire monologue, and because it was a lot of voiceover, I was like, this makes no sense. You have to rewrite this whole thing. Right. But it was also like, well, why don't we cut? Can we cut to a close up here? Well, I don't have a close up. Well, can we cut to an insert? No, I don't have an insert. Well, do you have coverage that's looking the other way? No, I don't. I'm like, if you only have one shot, I can't really tell you how to re-edit the scene. Yeah. But there's no way out. Yeah. So the biggest answer is like, have a good story and know how to tell it. That actually doesn't require a lot of money. No, you can shoot it with your iPhone. If it's a good story and the shots are in good places, that'll be a good movie.
Yep. Storyboarding is essential. So essential. Yeah.
Yep. And it's sad though, man, when you have students and they get to that place and they're in their thesis film and let's say they've spent $5,000, and asked money from their parents and asked money for friends or raised it on, sometimes they raise it on Kickstarter or whatever. And they're sitting there in post with a movie that is beyond not working, that is unsavable. It's pretty rough.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's pretty rough. So, Carl, I hope that answers your question. I don't know if you're thinking about applying to film school and if this will dissuade you or not. But yes, it is always very interesting. Yes, most of the movies are really bad. And yes, occasionally I've had, probably in the 10 years I've been teaching, 5 really, really genuinely talented students. Wow. That's it.
Wow. Yeah.
But these are people who are like, wow, this person is good. Like there's been a couple students where it was sort of like, I don't have anything to teach you, like, how to make a film. And that's pretty exciting.
That is cool.
So patrons, thank you as always for all of your support. We could not make the Cine-Files without you. We really appreciate it. We'd love these shorts. Questions. John, do you have anything you feel you need to tell them? For instance, how to contact you?
Oh, yeah. If you wanted to reach out to me, you can do so on my Twitter and Instagram @TheRocaSays, or rolling over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/JohnRocaSays, and see all the stuff I'm making over there. So a lot of fun. Yeah, there you go. That's my answers.
And me, first of all, I think that was my worst throw over to you of all time.
I
That might
love
have
it.
been the worst one. It's just,
Do we
like,
have
sometimes-
coverage on that? We can use another shot on that.
Well, I could just cut the whole thing. The nice thing, this is the great thing about doing an audio only podcast. It is
Yes.
so much easier for me to cut out the mistakes. This one I won't cut out because I think it was kind of funny. And if you want to talk to me more about film school or other things that I cut out of our shorts, you can reach me at SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. And once again, patrons, thank you all so much. And we'll see you next time on another Cinephile short.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Cine-Files Shorts. I am one of your hosts, John Roca, joined as always by the man, the myth, the legend, Steve Morris. And today we are back with a new topic from one of our patrons, Peter Bailone or Bailoni. I don't know if I'm saying either one of them, or maybe it's Balone. I don't know. It's something like that.
Pronounced Pater.
Is it Peter? Yes, Peter Bailoni or Peter Bailone, depending on how you're reading this. And he sends a message. He says, guys, I have a question that might make for an interesting, although controversial topic for a short. And hey, Steve and I are never shy about tackling a controversy, as I'm hoping we do it correctly. He goes on to say, with the mini controversy around cuties on Netflix, I was wondering your thoughts on why some films, Lolita, Call Me By Your Name, and even The Professional to an extent, that deal with the topic of underage sexuality are accepted as art, while others are seen as lurid or even exploitive. What marks the difference between acceptable narrative and unacceptable narratives when dealing with such taboo topics? Just a thought. Would also love to hear you two discuss 42, even though it isn't 10 years old, to mark the passing of Mr. Bozeman, if you feel like it's worth the effort. So, Steve, he's tackled us, or he's given us a controversial subject to tackle, and then tacked on a completely different subject for us to end on. Maybe he sensed it'd be better for us to end on something positive after we've
No, I
talked
think
about
maybe
something
these are two
controversial.
different shorts. I think maybe
Okay.
we can hold off on
Okay.
because the transition, I can't quite think of how to segue from Lolita to Jackie Robinson. I mean, I could probably come up with some stuff, but all of them would be probably offensive.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think this is an incredibly difficult topic.
Yeah.
You say we don't shy away from topics, and I really never want to.
Yeah.
I think my answers on this are continuing to evolve.
Okay.
If you had asked me this 5 or 10 years ago, I would have just look, art is art. And, and I've read Lolita. I don't know if you have. It is extremely disturbing.
Yeah.
It is also gorgeously written. Nabokov has such an amazing, for a guy that English isn't his first language, his command of the language is so incredible. And I want to read the opening line of Lolita because it's just so, and again, this is a book about a man falling in love with a 12-year-old girl and his relationship with her. So it's a fucked up book. But this is the first line of the book. Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul, Lolita. The tip of the tongue taking a trip of 3 steps down the palate to tap at 3 on the teeth. Lolita. That writing is stunning. And the fact that while writing it, and I say Lolita, my tongue is tapping my teeth 3 times. I mean, it's just so... And so it is a work of art. It is also an extremely disturbing book. And my feelings about it have changed. I mean, it's a really fucked up book.
Yeah, I agree. And even the 2 adaptations that have been done with James Mason that Stanley Kubrick did, and Peter Sellers and Shelley Winters, and I forget the actress who plays Lolita, and then the one that was done with Jeremy Irons. That was done. I think Adrian Lynn did that one. I believe the guy who did 9.5 Weeks. One was done to explore the sadness of a man who would allow himself to be in love with a 12-year-old, and another one, the other more modern version, was done to sexually titillate, which I think is incorrect, with Dominique Swain. And even Dominique Swain has come out and said afterwards how she felt she was taken advantage of in the movie and how she portrayed Lolita. But in the original, it's done to showcase the sad desperation of a middle-aged man, or slightly older than middle-aged man, thinking that he could go after or be with someone so young. And Peter Sellers really hammering home that as he pursues him through the entire movie. So this is a very interesting question. I do want to give some background for people who don't know about the cuties
Mm.
controversy here for Netflix. So this there was a spike in U.S. customer cancellations of Netflix following the debut of Cuties, and Cuties tells the story of an 11-year-old Senegalese girl living in Paris who struggles to find her identity, torn between her family's Muslim traditions and her peer group's attempts to emulate the sexualized persona of women as portrayed in Western culture and on social media. The film includes scenes of the protagonist Amy performing highly sexualized dance routines with the Cuties dance crew and shows the underage characters in other adult situations, and predictably a backlash ensued. This is coming from Variety. The hashtag cancel Netflix started trending worldwide on September 9th on its release. The account cancellations hit a peak of about 5 times the churn rate of January 1st, 2019. So this is people were canceling this thing because they were incorrectly, in my opinion, looking at this as an exploitation of these young girls rather than this French director exploring what is actually happening for young girls of this age in our current society in another country. It's a social commentary against the sexualization of young children, and it actually won awards. And it's supposed to showcase the pressure that young girls face on social media and from society more generally growing up. And we'd encourage, and the statement from the company said they'd encourage anyone who cares about these important issues to watch the movie. So she said it was supposed to. The director Decoré said that the purpose of her film is to show the world through the eyes of young girls and shine a spotlight on the problem of social media, encouraging children to assume hyper sexualized identity. So it became a very controversial thing because it's like, well, you're showing them in these scenes and in these sequences, and you are trying to show the reality of what's actually happening. And of course, the right, the religious right, and even some members of the left struck back against this series and said it was exploitive of young girls and was made for pedophiliacs and all this kind of stuff. And so wherever you fall on the controversy, this is what the controversy was. So
Yeah.
good.
I think it's this is super complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's, my main, and that, because I believe that to some degree, the job of artists is to put the mirror up to nature.
Yeah.
And if there's shit going on in the world, and one of the things that is going on in the world is the increasing sexualization of young girls.
Yeah.
Through the images within the media, through social media, through the access to pornography, like all of these things, this is really happening. Yeah. And so to say that art should ignore that because we don't want to cross certain lines is problematic. We also don't want to cross certain lines,
Right.
So it's like, it's really hard. Like I saw, this is a weird analogy, but there's been lots of talk because, we have a bunch of friends who are comic book artists, and comics have traditionally been a medium mostly read by boys and men, and the women and their outfits and their bodies were very objectified. Yeah. And I once saw a woman who, and like the example they were using was Power Girl, and Power Girl, who is a woman who is always drawn as very buxom. Mm-hmm. And this female comic book artist whose name I can't remember, took the classic drawing and then redrew it, not objectifying her. Still the same sort of body type, but the way the costume hung, what the pose was, all those things allowed it to be a great drawing, but not necessarily objectifying. And so like we get into this thing of, well, first of all, young girls are being sexualized.
Yes.
And so if I want to show, and I mean, I'm sure you've seen it too. I've seen like a 9-10-year-old girl wearing sexy clothes at the mall. Yeah. And it's just like, ugh. So now I want to make a movie that's dealing with that. Yeah. And I put the girl in the clothes that was for real what's happening. Yeah. And then someone watches my movie and says, well, you're objectifying the girl. And It's like, well, kind of, I just did. Because a lot of movies are about, well, what was your perception? So if a pedophile watched that film and got turned on, which, like, what's my set of responsibility? And then if a young girl watches that film and instead of seeing it as a comment on the sexualization of young girls goes, I love that outfit. Well, what's happening? I mean, that's why I go, this is such a complicated issue.
Yeah. I feel, Steve, like once we start policing art, we lose art. And I think that's where it comes to for me. And this idea of canceling Netflix, this is censorship. If Netflix buys something that was an award-winning film and puts it out for people to consume, people have every right to like it or hate it, right? But to encourage people to cancel a streaming service because of it, to me, is censorship. And these are probably the same people who were crying about canceling their favorite comic or their favorite actor because they said something untowards about women or about people of color or whatever in the past. They're the same ones crying about cancel culture, but here they are trying to cancel a streaming service. So
well, wait. What's I don't understand what the difference is. Like, what's the difference between canceling?
I'm saying that it's hypocrisy, is what I'm saying. Don't cry about a comic being canceled, then turn around and with the other side of your mouth want a streaming service to be canceled.
Wait, so you're saying, but there are all sorts of women on the left who are angry and rightfully so about the way women are portrayed in the media. Yeah. I mean, this isn't just people on the right that we're saying canceling cuties.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But I'm saying it's not just people on the right. So I don't understand. I mean, you know, to me,
I said some of these people were blah, blah, blah.
Right. But to me, the finding something offensive and then canceling your Netflix subscription is exactly it's the same thing.
Oh, no, you have a right to cancel of course. I'm saying if you're encouraging other people to cancel, that's where the problem lies, right? In my opinion, because Netflix is not, it is just a service providing entertainment for people to watch, right? Canceling a person specifically or canceling a film specifically, that's separate. But canceling a service that provides this entertainment and has in the past provided groundbreaking entertainment that has pushed the boundaries, forced you to think about things, forced you to analyze your opinion about the world or about gender politics or about actual politics or international relations, I think is a dangerous thing. You know, we start to have issues when we start to cancel the things that services that allow these films to be shown or allow these films to be screened. I think that's dangerous. And if you want to cancel the movie, knock yourself out. I don't have a problem with that. That's your right and freedom of speech. But if you want to cancel a service, I think that's where the problem for me, it becomes an issue, you know? And
I don't know if I see the distinction. I mean,
really?
Yeah, I mean,
explain to me how. I want to hear how do you?
Well, I mean, so people are furious at Roseanne, and so everyone says don't watch ABC.
Yeah, and I think that's wrong. That's what I'm saying, dude.
I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong too. But we've had this argument in the other direction. Right. You know, it's like I mean, I think everybody has the right to watch whatever the hell they want to watch. Right. But I'm very concerned about censorship from all directions. My concern about censorship isn't about or so-called cancel culture isn't from one direction or another. I mean, in fact, that's worse.
No, but I'm consistent in this. Don't cancel services, don't cancel networks, but you can cancel people or shows. To me, that's different because networks and streaming services and studios and TV production companies, they put things out there for people to consume. And for you to take one movie and banish the entire service off one movie, I think is incorrect.
I mean, I agree with you, but that's just what I see happening all the time. Cancel the New York Times, cancel whatever it is. It's happening constantly.
Right.
Don't go to Universal Studios because it has a Harry Potter land. Right. You know, like that's what I see all the time.
So you're saying any canceling is wrong.
I am very, very concerned about the mob censoring things. Mm-hmm. Okay. I am very concerned about the people becoming irate and a huge, storm of controversy over any piece of art.
But look how you construct it, though. You're saying the mob, which is already a negative connotation.
Yes, it
is. It doesn't have to be the mob. It can just be people who don't want. It could be mothers and fathers who believe in their hearts that this program or this character, this actor, this film or whatever shouldn't be out there for people to consume.
You know,
Well,
it doesn't necessarily make him a mob, though.
No, absolutely. If I look at my son wants to play what's the video game, the shooting game that everyone's playing?
Vice City.
I don't know. I don't remember what it is. There's a game
Grand
that
Theft Auto
everyone's
or something.
And no, it's not even that bad.
Oh, okay.
And I've said no because it's too violent. Like
Right.
that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
There are TV shows that I don't like because of their politics or because of things. That's fine. When I go online and say everybody cancel blank or don't go to blank, well now and then if a million people agree with me,
Right.
now we've gotten to the mob. You know, and particularly when people don't watch the thing, you know.
Right.
Like people Jews were really upset. I'm Jewish, and Jews were really upset about Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ.
Right.
I went to see Passion of the Christ. I don't think that movie's anti-Semitic.
Right.
I think there's all sorts of things you could have problems with in that film, but anti-Semitism to me isn't one of them. And so the outcry of take it out of the theater,
Right.
or Monty Python's Life of Brian is one we talked about on the show,
Right.
where somebody starts a campaign to ban this movie and it gets banned a whole bunch of places. I don't like that.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to say I don't like that over things that I really like Life of Brian,
Yeah.
well then what should be my position on things that I don't like? You know,
Right.
if is it the same, you know, because I believe in freedom of speech. And I guess, you know, to bring it back to the actual question.
Yeah.
It is like, you know, we've talked about, do we do Animal House on the show? And I think in general, our conclusion has been no. And there is a sex scene with a girl who ends up being 13,
Right.
you know, and then there's, you know, a real elevation of the drunken frat party womanizing thing.
Right.
That's a big part of what Animal House is. I think Animal House is a really good movie.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I have a way to talk about it on the show. You know, so I don't think it should be boycotted. I don't think it should be canceled.
Right.
But I don't really know that I have a way to discuss it that's constructive.
Are you boycotting the show, the film on our show?
Am I probably. I mean, I would say I would put it differently.
Okay.
I don't know what to say. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I think we say, like, I've been coming around on this and actually meant to have a conversation with you about it, that I'd like to tackle Animal House and maybe get Sasha Pearl Raver or one of our female guests that have been in the past, or a new female guest who actually
Sasha would be great on Animal House.
Right. Who actually doesn't have an issue with, or has issues with it, but still appreciates the film, so we can have a more fleshed out, well-rounded discussion about it. Because I think there are some very funny parts of the movie. And also, we can't deny that a lot of what drives these characters, and by the way, Steve, I mean, these are people in their mid to late 20s playing young college kids. A lot of what they tackle, partying, drinking, trying to see a girl naked. This was stuff that was at the time, very, how can I say this? Very
normal.
Normal. Yeah. And it's and now it's become taboo, and I get that. And I understand that, but by the same token, you've got to put things in context, right? And I think that's where we can do an interesting job trying to put this film in context with certain scenes. Same thing with Revenge of the Nerds. Revenge of the Nerds is overall a very positive film about accepting people who are different than you. However,
one truly horrible scene.
Yeah, there's where he, kind of tricks this girl into having sex with him, thinking that she's having sex with someone else, and it's actually him. It's not. I don't know how to classify it. I'm a man, so I can't classify it. I don't know if it's rape. I don't know if it's rape or sexual assault because
if she wouldn't give consent to him,
right,
which she wouldn't.
I don't know. Right.
As
I said, I don't know.
Well, and what is that scene? In the end, she really likes it and falls in love with the nerd. It's a classic male fantasy,
right?
That reinforces that what he did was okay.
And that sometimes means yes, right?
Well, and exactly, and it's like, so here's the thing, and maybe we should do Animal House for exactly this reason, is that I think Animal House, the boys have been horny since the beginning of boys.
Yes,
you know what I mean. Like the fact that we were from the ages of 12 until, I don't know, 50, 12 until the area of adolescence. Guys are really obsessed with sex.
Yes.
That's one point. That's true. The second thing that's true is that the stuff that goes on in Animal House, maybe not to that level, but was behavior that happened at colleges and fraternities, and young men were obsessed with seeing girls naked, and young men did peek into the locker room like in Porky's.
Right.
Those things happen, and those stories had never been told on film.
Right.
And so in one sense, I think Animal House does this very positive thing, which is it exposes this truth about men that had been, hidden in the locker room.
Right.
But I also think what it did was it enabled and it encouraged that behavior to go even farther, because now you have the model in the movie, and now people are having toga parties, and now people, because the heroes of the film, because I thought when John Belushi, I saw it when I was 11 or something, when John Belushi climbs the ladder to look at the girls having the pillow fight, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world.
Right.
I was totally with John Belushi. And how did that affect my behavior? And how did it affect the behavior of tons of other young men? And so this is exactly, I think, to the point of this question, which is like, do I think Animal House is a really good movie? Totally. Do I think it says some things that are true about young men? Absolutely. Is the world better off or worse off for having Animal House? I don't know.
Yeah. I couldn't possibly remotely have an educated opinion on that, because it would have to poll everybody in the world and for generations and find out how it affected them. But to get back to the question here that was asked, this idea of art versus commerce when it comes to the sexualization of young girls in certain movies. The Professional is an interesting one. I just interviewed Jean Reno for like 15 minutes for the channel, and I brought up The Professional and if there was going to be a sequel, but he has said on a number of occasions that it's like he is still proud of the film, still proud of what happened in the film. But of course, a lot of people have turned on that film now in retrospect and said, it's like the sexualization of a young Natalie Portman, and how is this old man having these feelings about him? And I've begun to push back on that, because he is an emotionally stunted male, and for him, this kind of human connection, and I never felt it was sexual. It was more like just an attraction here, a connection, a human connection with someone who was, who's female. I don't think ever had in his life, and he's a ruthless killer, an assassin. But for her, he is vulnerable and sweet and protective and all these things. And he never once tries to have sex with her or take off her clothes or kiss her or make out with her. There is this kind of progression of this relationship from friendship or protector to a little bit more that you can see in a love, but not a love that is necessarily sexual. But of course, people will do, oh, well, she's doing this and she's doing that. And the allegory of the gun and the symbolism of a gun in a young woman's hand, all of that to symbolize his penis. To me, it's just, it goes out there. And I don't 100% agree with it, It doesn't mean that I support the sexualization of young girls or think they should. I just don't 100% agree with it. I think I take the story for what it is. It's a guy who is clearly emotionally stunted, hasn't gone past a certain level in his brain. His body has moved forward, but his brain hasn't. So for him, this connection with a girl, I wouldn't say innocent because she witnessed the death of her parents, but a girl who is wanting to climb out of her own hole of depression and sadness of the loss of her parents, mirrors his own climb out of being this kind of mindless killer for so long. And so they help each other on this journey. And in the end, what happens, happens. So to me, that's one of those films that I think is art because it challenges you. Art is supposed to challenge you. Yeah. It's not supposed to make you feel good and rub your head and your tummy and put you to bed. It's supposed to challenge you, some art, and force you to think about things in a certain way and get out of your preconceived notions or judgments of the world. And that's why I think certain ones are considered art, because they're saying more about the subject matter that's happening, and other ones can be hypersexual. As a majority of these horror films, a majority of these prison movies that people seem to love and defend, those are very much sexual things, and you can't remove that. So for me, you got to be consistent in your point of view of these things.
So I have so many.
You hate Animal House and you're good with Friday the 13th, constantly using the male gaze on these girls who are scantily clad. You got to explain it to me how you think that's different.
I don't think that's different.
Yeah,
If
some
you're
people
talking to
do,
me.
though.
So I have so many thoughts. The first one just on the professional. There's no question in my mind that Luc Besson is playing with that attraction.
Yes.
Like that's an element. I don't know about the symbolism of holding a gun and stuff like that, but like clearly watching that movie, one of the tensions is going, wait, what's happening here?
Right.
Like how do I feel about this? That's definitely in there.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing. I agree with you. It's like we shouldn't put up walls that say, oh, this is a thing we can't talk about. And we certainly shouldn't go like, we need to project the idealized human beings in all of our films where everybody is nice and nobody is objectified and no one's a racist and no one's,
Right.
Because that's like exactly, it's a weird analogy, but it's exactly what's wrong with certain Gene Roddenberry Star Trek things.
Yeah.
Is they try to make everyone too perfect. Like we're not perfect.
Yeah.
And the thing is that people are, like sexual attraction is real.
Mm-hmm.
The people like certain bodies that look certain ways and are attracted to them. We can't just ignore that in filmmaking. I had an interesting conversation. I see if I can say it very quickly with a good friend of ours who's very beautiful. And we were talking about attractiveness, and we were also talking about the things that she does with hair care products or these things, or, or with the clothes that she wears to accentuate her beauty. And I was always raised in like the liberal California, Berkeley, don't judge a book by its cover, don't judge people by their appearances, that physical appearances and stuff are unimportant and it's what's inside is matter. That's the value system I was raised with.
Right.
And having that conversation with her, it was such an epiphany, because I went, wait, we all have all these traits. We have intelligence and strength and endurance and, basically the list of Dungeons and Dragons attributes.
Yeah.
And then we can do stuff with them to improve them. So you can, go to the library and read a lot and study in order to bring up your brain power.
Yeah.
You can go to the gym and lift weights, bring up your strength. You can do all these things. And those various things give you advantages in the world. Why is physical attractiveness put on the bottom of the list? Clearly, people are born with certain levels of physical attractiveness, and then you can put in a lot of effort in the way they dress and exercise and makeup and hairstyling. And those things give them advantages when they go out into the world to get a job, to get a date, all those things. And why are we valuing strength over beauty or intelligence over strength? Why are we putting these things up? And it's like, we go to a movie to have an emotional reaction to things.
Yeah.
Well, one of the emotional reactions is to beauty. Like if I had a beautiful Lawrence of Arabia shot and you go, oh my God, that photography is so beautiful. Or I have a beautiful, amazing location, like the hotel in The Shining. You're like, oh my God, this location is amazing. It's beautiful. Now I have a beautiful person on screen.
Yep.
Why is that not okay?
Yeah. We have to find our way back to that middle ground again, Steve, in my opinion. It's like, the Me Too movement is absolutely valid, and it's so great to see so many people finally listening, including, I'm sure, you and I, hearing some of the things that women are saying and speaking about, that for numerous decades, multiple generations of women have endured at the hands of men or at the hands of a patriarchal society. That's very important to hear and listen and understand. But by the same token, this desire to destroy the idea of physical attraction as being something of value, I think, is not good, because I think people aspire to be the best person of themselves, and sometimes it is the working out and the walking, and people do naturally feel better or healthier,
absolutely,
when they lose weight or whatever. And I always find it hypocritical that whenever these celebrities are like, when they're heavier, they're just like, embrace my look and I embrace my weight and I've never been happier. And then when they lose 60 to 100 pounds, they're crowing about it on the latest gossip magazine or whatever. And it's like, well, which is it? Which is it? And so it's just like this kind of stuff that I find throughout the whole idea of, I think you shouldn't body shame, absolutely. And I think these magazines that people point out, and women have pointed out, have an unrealistic view of beauty. Yes, 1,000,000%. But acting does not have to adhere to that. Films do not have to adhere to that. Films for generations, for decades, have had people who are good looking and unattractive, heavy and skinny and in the middle, all throughout, and have played leads all throughout. Is it consistently skinnier, more matinee style looking people? Yes. But by the same token, we shouldn't discount the fact that some of them were born with certain attributes. This is like akin to like being upset because someone's more intelligent than you are. We shouldn't intelligence shame. And it's like, well, no, I'm using what I've been given to achieve a certain thing, and I'm motivated because a lot of these people are completely unhappy eating as little as possible to stay in that shape, but they also know that that's how they achieve success, and maybe down the road we change and it's more consistently that people just look like regular people. Like my girlfriend tries to point out on the Brits all the time do not worry about being skinny or not skinny. There are definitely many of people of weight or who have pounds on them who play leads in numerous TV series and movies and what have you. So maybe we're still a young country and we'll get there someday. But I don't think it should be vilified, as you stated.
Yeah, I think all these issues are way more complicated than the sound bites would lead us to believe.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because I think women have been objectified.
Yes.
They have been presented with terrible body images. They
Right.
have, and they have been subjected to behavior from men and young men that just as we said, we were taught it was okay.
Yeah.
Now I was a shy kid who wasn't aggressively doing anything, so I didn't do these things.
Right.
But like you think about like the Kavanaugh hearings and
Yeah,
what those
yeah.
stories were. Those are Animal House stories.
Right.
And how much behavior did you see in high school or college that was in those directions?
Yeah.
Where guys are drinking and, we knew a guy, I won't say what his name was, but we knew him. I'm going to say Tom. His nickname was Naked Tom because he dropped his pants all the time. His name wasn't really Tom. I changed it, but
Right.
and that was hilarious, but maybe it wasn't hilarious.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it, because I don't know that there wasn't one woman at the party that thought that was really disturbed by it and
Yeah.
offended by it. And,
Yeah.
and because the behavior was crazy behavior,
Right.
And so I think these issues are, I think, I'm going to go back to where I started from. I dislike censorship. I believe that art needs to explore all the nooks and crannies of human behavior. And when you look at human behavior, there's a lot of weird shit in there.
There really is.
And I don't think we should avoid it. The other movie we didn't talk about is American Beauty.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's all up in this. And my feelings about that movie, which I liked when I saw it, my feelings about it now, both because of the subject matter and because of Kevin Spacey, is like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
But because this is the thing. This is a middle-aged guy obsessing about a high school girl.
Yep.
Who we then see, topless in the movie.
Right.
And it is a beautiful sexualized images of her.
Mm-hmm.
And while we we like the main character.
Yeah. Lester
So
Burnham.
what message is that telling us?
Right. He's purposely constructed to be someone we cheer for. And then seeing him, and it's certainly a film made for men. It is not made for women, because Annette Bening is played as a shrill nag who's cheating on the main character. Her aspirations to be successful in her life and achieve a certain level of economic mobility or economic status is seen as negative by Lester Burnham, who is the rebel, destroying all these kinds of things. But he's also creeping after his daughter's friend. And his daughter and the friend call him out on it until that fateful night, and, something else happens there, because that young girl is also railing against the plasticity of beauty, the plasticity of being wanted by men. And initially she finds power in it, but then once she veers behind the curtain and realizes there's nothing behind that power but dudes just wanting to have sex with her, there's no real emotional connection or depth to that. That's her journey to struggle with as she embraces that as a young woman coming into her own as well. So, I get issues with it, but I think there's still stuff to explore there.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it in forever. My memory is it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Other than Plastic Bag Guy.
I was just going to say.
Yeah. well, and the thing is like, has a in general relatively good ordinary man become sexually attracted to an underage girl in history? Yeah.
Yes.
Shit happens, you know. Like we can't. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we saw the Jennifer Lopez movie that just happened, The Boy Next Door, from a year or two ago. That's her having sexual relations with a high school kid. And that was trumpeted as, this is, that's right, an older woman getting with a younger man. And I get it. I'm cool with it. But, is that how we balance? Is that how we bring the scale back to the middle? Is having a bunch of films where older women go after younger guys? Then great, go to it. And we're back in the middle. Then what do we do from this point forward? That's what I want to know.
Well, and I know this conversation is going on forever, but
I
know, but this is, again, one of the weird things is that there's always been a completely different set of standards for men and women. And we've talked a lot about the physical standards for women that are so much more severe, but also like if you hear the story of an adult male teacher having sex with a young girl student, it's like, ugh, horrible.
Right.
I know that I've heard, like there are times where the young boy student has the hot teacher. That's like a male fantasy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like the whole perception of it is totally different. And frankly, I know 2 guys who lost their virginity to women who were much older, like at a very young age, and it's like, and when they have told the story, it's like, no, it's good. And listening to the story, I'm like, ooh, it's kind of not,
Yeah. All right. Well, there we go. All right. Well, Peter Bailone, I hope we answered your question. I hope we, dived into this in a way that you feel was respectful and layered and complex and nuanced and what have you, as much as we can in the Cine-Files short. And I hope you don't mind that we saved your 42 conversation for another short down the road. But this one certainly, as you can tell, sparked a lot of conversation between us, a lot of different points of views addressing this situation. We hope we haven't offended anybody with our points of views and would be willing to have open conversations with anyone who felt that maybe we were a bit off the mark here on this one. So we thought we'd tackle it and challenge ourselves, and we hope we addressed it in a respectful, intelligent way. All right, there we go. All right, well, thanks everybody for listening to this Cinephile short. For Steve Morris, I'm John Roca, and for the Cinephiles, thanks so much. And we'll talk to you next time with another brand new episode of the Cinephile Shorts.